Welcome. So great to have you here. This is so exciting. We've covered some very significant information in the past few clips, and today it's going to get even bigger. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we've already covered. Over the past few clips, what we've been talking about is, we've talked about the succession of 8 kings, as we found in Revelation chapter 17. We talked about the evil monetary system that is going to be in a city that sits on 7 mountains. We also talked about the destruction of that evil monetary system, that city. And we've also covered some of the plagues that are going to be associated with those that have accepted and are using that mark of the beast system. We do not want to have any part of that, do we? Now, we also talked about Daniel chapter 11 with the succession of 8 kings that is referenced in that chapter as well. And we saw that absolutely, positively, we cannot be any further than the 4th king, because the events of the 6th, 7th, and 8th king, they haven't happened yet. So we can't be any further than the 4th king, but we saw substantial evidence validating that we absolutely are on the 4th king. Khamenei is the 4th king. Now, we also covered the first 14 of the points of the list of the 53 things that are pointed out in the book, the Prophetic Playbook Story. And today we're going to be covering points number 15 to about number 23. So again, I want you to, be writing in the book, and I just want you to be writing down beside each one of them what you think. Yes, no, probably not, probably so, or I don't know. And again, as you go through the book, write down your questions, impressions, suggestions, and confirmations. This is your book, your workbook, to work with God, to feel for what does God want you to do to prepare your family, your loved ones, and also what you can do to prepare to help those who are not prepared. Now, today is such an exciting chapter. We're going to be talking about chapter 3 in the Prophetic Playbook Story. This is about Daniel chapter 8. So you've been reading the book. Daniel chapter 8 is about the United States, and it ends with the return of Christ in power and glory. And it is showing us that prophetically the United States is going to split up into 4 nations. Huge, major chapter. But we want to go through the whole chapter to make sure that we're not missing anything as far as taking things out of context on it. And we want to make sure that it talks about leading up to the return of Christ as well as this very moment in time. So let's begin with Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at the Suzanne in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the other came up last. So what is the ram representing? What are the horns representing? We get the answer by an angel who tells Daniel the answer. We read about it over in verse 20. Verse 20 says, And the ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the 2 kings of Media and Persia. So now we know what the ram represents. Let's go back over here and read more. And I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. but he did according to his will and became great. Now, okay, so let's go ahead and talk about this for a second. So these two kings, the kings over here in verse 20, it says the kings of Media and Persia. These two kings are going to push westward, northward, and southward. So eastward is not mentioned. Interesting. So what are we looking for? Well, in the book, the prophetic playbook story, you've seen this picture here. And in this picture here, we have the Persian Gulf. So we have Iran right here. We have Turkey right here. Anciently, around the time that Daniel received this vision, Media covered up into this area right over here. And is so part of what we now call Turkey. So I've been looking for a person that can become higher than Khamenei. And I thought, okay, so I keep watching this area here for who can become higher than Khamenei. And then back in 2016, I was watching Erdogan, and Erdogan was making, he was very bold. He's like a Hitler type of person to me, very strong-willed and very dictatorish. But anyways, I was keeping my eye on him, and then on Friday, June 15th, 2016, you probably remember hearing about in the news, there was a coup attempt, and while he was on the outskirts of his country, and I thought, oh my gosh, wow, is he going to be kicked out of being president over there? And I was just wondering, what is going on here? How is this prophecy of a person becoming higher than Khamenei, how is it going to play out? Who else could it be? And with Erdogan, I was thinking he has a ways to go to fulfill that prophecy, because at the time he was struggling in his own country. Obviously, there was a coup attempt on it, but there was these the PKK. He was fighting the terrorists inside of his country. He was fighting ISIS. He had millions of refugees flooding into his country, going through his country. His country was in a mess. And now, Friday, June 15, 2016, coup attempt. And that day I was just stunned. Well, by Saturday, he had pretty much squashed that coup attempt. And so I thought, okay, all right, well, we'll see where this goes now. And then Sunday was a huge, huge shock to me, because as you read in the book, and as you can see right here, it says that that Muslim scholars worldwide declare Erdogan to be the supreme leader for the entire Muslim world. When I read that, I just was shocked. Erdogan fulfilled prophecy. He became higher than Khamenei that day. Prophecy fulfilled right before my eyes. I'm looking at that going, wow, it happened. It really, really happened. And when you take a look at 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, what has Iran and Turkey been doing? Iran and Turkey have been pushing westward, northward, southward. And no beast, no nation has been able to stand before them, and no one could deliver out of their hand, and they've been doing according to their will, and they have been becoming great. Huge, huge prophecy in fulfillment. They are doing this at this very moment. This is huge. Now let's go ahead and read verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. So what is this he-goat? We get the answer in verse 21. The angel tells Daniel, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now, the fulfillment of Erdogan becoming higher than Khamenei was really important for helping me to understand something here, and that is to see that Erdogan was a president. He was not a king. But here in verse 20, it mentions that the two horns are kings. So anciently, the angel referred to Erdogan as a king, but now we know that that can also be interpreted as a president. So now, when we are looking at Grecia, the first king of Grecia, does that mean the first king of the country Grecia? No. Now we know that the first king of Grecia is being referenced as the first king the angel is referring to in Grecia in this vision here. So so in the United States we've had many presidents, but at the time that Daniel is having this vision, at the time that Daniel is seeing that this he-goat is coming from the west, not touching the ground, this is, the angel refers to him as the first king of Grecia. So Daniel is seeing this vision. The vision has a ram that has two horns. The two horns are high. The second one comes up and becomes higher than the first. And Daniel also sees this he-goat. And the angel is giving the interpretation that, hey, this is the first king of Grecia that we're talking about in this vision here. Now let's go ahead and see what this first king of Grecia does. Let's go over to verse 7. No, verse 6. Let's go over to verse 6. And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven. And out of one of them came four little horns, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south, and towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. Verse 8 is so very important to us right now, because what we are learning is that sometime after the attack of the United States upon Iran and Turkey, and the removal of Erdogan and Khamenei from power, that the he-goat, the president of the United States, that he's going to continue to wax great. And when he's strong, then something's going to happen. Somehow, some way, he's going to be out of power. Is he going to lose an election, or does his term run out? We don't want to think about anything worse than that. Here's the thing, is that when he is gone, then the United States splits up into four nations. Is there any other way that we can interpret it? No, there isn't. There's no other way. The United States is going to split up into 4 nations if this prophecy is going to be fulfilled. So, but we got to carry on with the rest of the chapter to be able to verify that this leads up to the return of Christ. And let's make sure that we cross the T's and dot the I's on it. So let's go ahead and carry on with verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east and towards the pleasant land. What's the pleasant land? That's the Holy Land. That's Israel. That's Jerusalem. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the host of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. This is the 8th king, as we identified in Revelation chapter 17. This is the vile person that we read about in Daniel chapter 11. This is the king that gets the power, seat, and authority of Satan and eventually goes to fight against Christ when Christ returns in power and glory. Let's continue on with verse 11. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and the host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of the transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Then I heard one saint speaking to another saint, and said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And it came to pass, when I, even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for meaning, then behold, there stood before me as an appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of Eli, which that called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood. And when he came, I was afraid, and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall the vision be. So there's some big clues here already that this is talking about the time leading up to the return of Christ. The sanctuary is going to be cleansed. When does that happen? At the return of Christ. Over here, the angel is helping Daniel to understand. And it says, For at the time of the end shall the vision be. Now let's carry on. Verse 18. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face towards the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed shall the end be. There we go, guys. This is about leading up to the return of Christ. But there is even more evidence. Let's continue on. Verse 20. And the ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, wherefore as 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. There we have the interpretation, guys. We are talking about there's this one nation, Grecia. We know absolutely, positively, that is the United States, and we know that whoever the president is that attacks Iran and Turkey and removes those 2 leaders from power, then we know that at the end of that person's power as president of the United States, then the United States is going to split up into 4 kingdoms, 4 nations, and not in his power, not in that president's power when that nation splits up. This is our moment in time now. We are leading up to this very moment right now. And we see the divisiveness going on in the United States. And this is our opportunity to work with God to know, what can we do? What can we do about this? Let's go ahead and continue on. Verse 23. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. And he shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Now, if you recall in Revelation chapter 19, we were reading that the eighth king, the beast, is going to be destroyed when Christ returns in power and glory, and he's going to be cast alive into a lake burning with fire and brimstone. So he's destroyed by the hand of Christ. Now, verse 26. And the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted, and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. So guys, as you can see, Daniel chapter 8 is about our time leading up to the return of Christ in power and glory. There is no other way that this can play out. This is specific individuals fulfilling specific prophecies. And right now, we are at the point where there is going to be a war between Grecia, Media, and Persia. Well, we know that the king of Persia is the king of Iran. It's Ayatollah Khamenei. We now know that Erdogan has become higher than Khamenei. Can anybody else? Khamenei is like 80 years old. Who can become higher than Khamenei right now? This looks like it has to be fulfilled here relatively soon. And when you take a look at what is shaping up between the United States and Iran, things are really shaping up for this war to happen between the United States and Iran. But what's interesting is that we don't see a war with the United States and Turkey shaping up yet. But guys, watch, because according to this prophecy, it's going to happen. And just as I was wondering, how in the world could someone become higher than Khamenei, that is from the Media area? It happened. It happened. This prophecy is going to be fulfilled. And now you've read the whole chapter of Daniel chapter 8, and you see that we didn't take it out of context. It's not being taken out of context. This is something that is about our moment in time. So now, what do we do? What do we do? As I've talked about before, we got to have this plan A and we got to have a plan B. We got to have a plan A about, you know what, let's not give up on our nation. This is the time to really strive to keep our nation great. So let's have a discussion. Let's have a discussion with the politicians, with candidates, with people in general. And let's talk about what we would want our nation, our politicians to do to be able to have a better government and have better policies. But you know what? At the same time, we got to have a plan B. And that plan B needs to include politicians and candidates and people in general too. And just have a discussion. Okay, what happens if our nation does split up into 4 nations? Now we got to think about which of the 4 nations are we going to be living in if that does happen? And what's going to be the boundaries of those 4 nations? I don't know. You read Daniel chapter 8 with me. It doesn't say what the boundaries are going to be. Everything, we just have to kind of look to see at what can we guesstimate at this time right now. Well, a lot of people I talk to say that they can see it. There's a West Coast nation, there's an East Coast nation, there's a Bible Belt, and then there's the Rocky Mountains, but we don't know for sure. We need to have that discussion in the areas where we live. And we need to talk about what can we do to have better politicians, better candidates, better policies. And also we got to include a discussion about the monetary system. We don't want to be part of the evil monetary system. And we got to have the discussion of, well, what's going to be going on with our monetary system? When the nation splits up into 4 nations, what's going to happen to the Federal Reserve? And if we had to replace the Federal Reserve, what type of monetary system would we want to replace it with? Guys, this is huge. These are big questions, big topics, and we're going to be talking more about it in the next clip. The next clip is going to be a review of chapters 1 through 3 and just taking a closer look at where we're at in this situation right now, and what we are going to need to try and figure out about how to have that bright future. So anyways, it's been great to have you here and enjoyed sharing this with you. As you can see, we need everyone to be aware of this, and we need to have that discussion. So share with people about the Prophetic Playbook story. Tell them to come on over to the website and sign up for this course over here, and let's gather people together. Gather people together, friends of Christ, liberty and/or peace, prosperity, and protection and freedom. Doesn't that sound wonderful? We can do it. Let's do it.